Okay, we're going to start with standard D2 here. I'm going to explain a couple of things. All right. This is about using data to estimate a mean or proportion and then find a margin of error. And you will see means or proportions and margins of errors written all throughout reports by the news or articles that you might read. So it's good to understand what it's actually telling you. All right, you can use statistics to make a reasonable prediction or inference about an entire population from a sample. So if you have an entire population and then you do a survey of a smaller portion of it, a sample, you can get some good data about the entire group. A population proportion is the ratio of members of a population with a particular characteristic to total members. So what that means is if your population is the entire state of Michigan, it's figuring out how many people in the entire state of Michigan have blonde hair. So you're taking everybody with a particular characteristic like blonde hair and dividing that number of people by the entire amount of people in the state of Michigan. A sample proportion is downsizing the amount of people you're looking at. So instead of saying everybody in Michigan, maybe it's everybody in Lansing. So then you're taking everybody with blonde hair in Lansing and dividing it by the total population of Lansing. So that's what those two terms will mean. To work with data to estimate a population mean or proportion, which is the first part of this standard, we're going to do activities in class together. So we're not actually doing notes on that part. That's something we have to do together in class. And then, sorry, I just got a text and I didn't know what I meant. Okay, where was I? Oh, when conducting a survey, you need to make the size of your sample large enough so it accurately represents the population. If I was doing a survey of all my students and I only asked 3 students after school, that's not a large enough portion of my student population to decide on anything. So that would have a very big margin of error because I'm only asking 3 people. The margin of error gives a limit on how much the responses of the sample would differ from the responses of the population. For example, in this example, if 40% of people prefer peanut butter, and maybe 40% of the people that you ask out of, 100, and the margin of error is plus or minus 4%. What that means is that it's likely that between 36 and 44% actually prefer peanut butter. So this might not be the actual percentage. The margin of error gives you an interval that it could be between. To find a margin of error, we're looking at a random sample. So this isn't a convenience sample or a volunteer sample or a systematic sample. This is a random sample and it's taken. The margin of error can be found by this equation here, or this fraction. So in this fraction, we have 1 over the square root of n, plus or minus. So whatever the n is, that's the sample size. So maybe you're taking a sample of 100 people, so 100 people will go in there. Then you punch out in a calculator, and this means that the sample percent is likely between those two values. So kind of up here, we added and subtracted the 4 to 40% to get your range of values. That's all that means there, is that you add and subtract it from the percentage that's given to you in order to find your percent. Okay, and the next one here, I have to cross some stuff out because I would like to do it over with you. There. Okay. Alright, so in this case, you did a survey of 1,011 people. 52% said that TV is their main source of news. So to find the margin of error, we have to take 1,011, because that's how many people we surveyed, and plug it in for n. And then when I plug it in for n, I punch it out, and I get plus or minus 0.03. But if you're talking percentage, we have to write that as plus or minus 3%. Okay. Now, how that translates is in B, given an interval that's likely to contain the exact percentage of people that use TV as their main source of news, we would write something like the actual percentage is between And then we have to take that margin of error plus or minus 3 and actually add and subtract it to the 52. So your margin of error actually is going to be between 49%, because that was 52 minus 3, and 55%, which is 52 plus 3. So you add and subtract 3 from your margin of error to get the two percentages that your actual percentage could be located between. And so that's just a little note there of what we did. Add and subtract the margin of error from the original percentage. Okay. And then in example 2, to find a sample size, if we're reading this, the polling company conducts a poll for an election. How many people did the company survey if the margin of error is plus or minus 5%? So what we do is, okay, they're not asking me for a margin of error, they're giving me a margin of error. So we're going to plug 5% in here for margin of error. So you'll notice that's what I did here. Notice I canceled out the plus or minus because since it's on either side, I don't need it. Now to actually solve for n here, you do have to rewrite the percentage in terms of a decimal. And then to solve, since n is in the denominator, we're going to multiply both sides by the square root of n, because that cancels it out on the right-hand side. And then we have 0.05 square root of n equals 1. And then I'm going to get that by itself. So I'm going to take 1 and divide it by 0.05, and I get the square root of n. And 1 divided by 0.05 gives me 20. Okay. And then to solve for n, the opposite of square rooting is squaring. So I'm going to square both sides, and when I do that, I end up getting a population size of 400 people. And that would be your final answer. Okay? So again, the margin of error stuff isn't the whole standard, but we've done one example of just finding margin of error, because you have to be able to do that to get a 3, and then one example of finding a sample size, which you have to be able to do to get a 4. And then we're going to do the rest of the standard in class, because that is more in the form of an activity. So, all right, this is Crisscross signing off.